Welcome back to ESBR Boxing's YouTube channel. Delighted to be joined by Danny, and we are reacting to what we have just witnessed there, the heavyweight clash on the Magnificent Seven card, as David Adeleye destroys Sol Dacres inside 2 minutes or 2.5 minutes of the very first round. Danny, what's your immediate reaction to what we've just seen there?
Yeah, unbelievable, wasn't it? I did think Adelaide would win the fight, but I did not think it would be like that. He's someone who you maybe wondered where he would go after that defeat to Fabio Wardley. I think given what Fabio Wardley's gone on to do against Fraser Clark, maybe made that look a bit better, but still it was a big night for him, big night for both of them. And to do what he did to Sol Dacres, who whatever you think of what he's done as a professional, he's a very good amateur. I think in terms of English champions, he's a decent English champion. I think you can't take that away from him. And to go and do that for him is massive for David Adeleye and his career, and especially what's going on in the heavyweight division, puts him right in the back in the mix. Sol Dacres, who we maybe come on to, that's a devastating one. Difficult to see a way back to even the upper echelons of domestic level, but yeah, just stunning, really.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. I mean, not a lot to actually dissect when you're looking at the fight itself. I thought, but I agree with what you said. I know you and I were talking beforehand, and we both did say that we thought Adelaide would win, but admittedly, maybe thought it was going to go late into the fight anyway, even going the full distance. But yeah, I mean, he looked pretty sharp, didn't he? I mean, I think his jab looked even quite sharp. And what you alluded to the Fabio Wardley fight there. I know another thing that you said was like, yeah, up until Fabio Wardley kind of like took over that fight, he looked decent enough, did Ale. He was winning a few of the rounds anyway. Um, and yeah, I mean, emphatic, I suppose. The actual shot itself, like it looked like a kind of like a check left hook, whether it just completely knocked Sol Dacres' equilibrium, like whether it was actually like a shot that landed or did it just something glance his temple, his neck, whatever it was. Like, yeah, but whatever it was, he was all over the show, as you said, couldn't get up. Right decision to call it off there and then, I think, from the referee as well. No complaints from me. You mentioned perhaps where Sol Dacres could go. We'll talk about him first because we'll maybe end it on a high with David Adeleye and seeing what he could do. But yeah, after suffering such a damaging defeat like that, yes, he was probably the underdog in that fight, but a lot of people would have been backing him to beat Adeleye there. But to lose in that fashion, where do you think he goes from here? How do you think he picks himself up if he does?
I think like I know he's signed to Frank Warren. I don't know what his contractual situation is, but he's not a big name. He's not a massive ticket seller. You wouldn't have thought he's someone who they're going to give a big long rebuild to. I think a fight that makes sense is just him versus Fraser Clark. Maybe get Clark potentially have one run out, given how brutal his stoppage was and the injury sustained against Fabio Wardley, and then just make that fight. That's a real like loser leaves town fight. Domestically, I don't see what other options there are. Even a fight against the likes of Moses Atama, he's gone well past that now, really. And I can't think of, too many up and coming heavyweights, which I'm sure isn't the route Dakers would want to take. Ideally, he'd want to, eventually establish himself as that A side. But to do that, he needs to find a good win from somewhere. And Fraser Clark's one that jumps up to me. And maybe Adelaide, someone like Adelaide will potentially be looking at the likes of Fraser Clark now, but I don't think that's a fight I would potentially want for Fraser Clark, next year. Again, going back to what happened against Fabio Wardley. So that's what I would like to see. It's as I say, a real loser leaves town fight. It's a fight I wouldn't necessarily write either man off then. I think I'd probably make Fraser Clark the favourite, but it's one that makes all the sense in the world to me.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see where Sol Dacres goes from here. I mean, we're not saying, he might want to, he might pick himself up. That might have just been caught cold. We don't know, we don't know. He could, in a couple of years' time, we could be talking about Sol Dacres and he might have gone on to win titles. We can't predict the future, but yeah, right now I agree. I think Fraser Clark's a good one that comes to mind. Obviously, he'll be having a little break as well over Christmas, probably looking to get back to winning ways in, the first 4 or 5 months of the year, 2025, you'd think. Does that fight make sense? As you mentioned, it's kind of the way you put it quite elegantly. Loser leaves town. Yeah, don't know where the loser would go there, especially with well, for Fraser Clark anyway, the age he is as well, having obviously turned over very late from the amateur ranks. Yeah. And what about the upcoming fight between Johnny Fisher and Dave Allen? Does the loser of that fight Sol Dacres? Does the winner of that fight Sol Dacres? Or even David Adeleye? Is that a fight that you would maybe like to see?
Yeah, it's not a bad shout actually. I think um even given what happened to Sol Deckers, I think he would still represent, with all respect to Dave Allen, a tougher test for Johnny Fisher. But I'm not sure if it's a fight. If you're in the Fisher business, you'd be in a great rush to make because you can't do a better job on him than Adelaide's just done. And I think that's still a difficult fight for Johnny Fisher, Sol Dacres, to be honest. Stylistically, he's a much more experienced boxer, certainly in terms of amateur pedigree. So whilst it'll be a great fight for Sol Dacres, it'll be a big fight, it'll be a headline fight. Johnny Fisher's a headline fighter, certainly in domestic UK standard fight night terms. But I just knowing the business of boxing, I would think it's unlikely, but it'd be a good fight. Dave Allen, I think, with respect to Dave, he's probably looking for big money fights. However, in saying that, if he is to lose to Johnny Fisher, he's a pretty big underdog in that fight. I don't know how many big money fights there'll be for him. Sol Dacres would still probably represent a decent payday. So yeah, that one I could see potentially being more likely. The Fisher one, unfortunately, not so much.
Yeah, yeah, can't really disagree with what you've said there, mate. To round off, we'll leave it with the winner, David Adeleye. After, as you said, after losing for the first time as a pro to Fabio Wardley, great way to bounce back. Obviously, ending the year on a high, so to speak. Well, he'd only had 2 minutes of action as well, so he'll be fresh as a daisy going into the new year. What do you think that a perfect 2025 looks like for him, and a couple of names or maybe even belts that you'd like to see him potentially fight for or pick up?
It's interesting. It depends on what route he wants to go. I mean, he could go back down the domestic route and attempt to, become British champion. I think that's realistically not going to happen until Fabio Wardley vacates the belt. Not because I think he's had no chance of beating Fabio Wardley. I just don't think there's going to be any appetite for a rematch between them two. If I was him, I'd, go down the international route, start picking off maybe some like fringe top 25s, top 30 names, maybe some decent heavyweights of the past who have perhaps lost a step. And the belts are going to fragment. David Adeley's still young. It's going to be an interesting period in the heavyweight division over the next 3 or 4 years. Worse fighters than him have climbed up the rankings and got world title shots. I'm not saying David Adeley is a world title fighter. I think he's got some very good attributes that will cause some good heavyweights a lot of problems. But I think that's the route I would rather take. But again, you don't know. The fight's just happened. We've not even seen an interview from him or his team, so we don't know what route they'll take. But a lot more options for him now than there were, whatever that Wardley fight was a year ago or so.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Whether or not he goes the domestic route again, as you said, depends on what happens with the British title, because you know yourself, a lot of fighters, that would be their pride and joy winning the Lonsdale belt, and fair play. David Adelaide might be one of those fighters, you never know. But yeah, the the international angle isn't a bad idea as well. As you said, you could think of probably a handful of names who once were those were even world title challengers, who are definitely have lost a step, or in football in terms kind of lost that half yard of pace. So yeah, I think that's maybe not a bad route for David Adelaide to go. But yeah, certainly a big 2025 on the horizon for him now after blasting through Sol Dacres inside one round on this magnificent seven show. Danny, thanks very much for joining me, mate. Guys, if you enjoyed this video, please do catch the rest of our content. Hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, and let us know in the comments what you think of our content, and we can refine that going forward. Danny, thanks very much for your time, mate, and speak to you again soon.
Here's mate.